Hey, yo, I got a new one for you. And this is not to bash Costco in any way, but I had to put them in the title. It just seemed topical. Let's get started.
Starts dipping behind the long rows of warehouses and vanishes behind the store's boxy roofline. I came there because I had promised myself that the engagement dinner needed at least some attempt at organization. My fiancée, Marissa, loved the idea of a small celebration before the actual engagement party. I took care of most of the errands, partly because I preferred doing things alone, and partly because she always claimed she had mountains of work. So Costco became my mission for the day. I planned to grab the drinks, a few trays of the appetizers she liked, and maybe check the price on the flower arrangements in the corner near the bakery. The lot was packed the way it always was on a weekday evening. I found a spot halfway down the row and parked. When I stepped out of the car, I heard the usual chorus of shopping carts rattling against each other, kids yelling, and the whoosh of the automatic doors opening in the distance. I closed the door and started walking toward the store. Nothing felt suspicious. Nothing felt unusual. It was just another errand, another responsibility, another small brick in the wall of the life we were building. Then I saw her car. Marissa always parked close to the entrance, even if it meant circling the lot twice. So seeing her car tucked deep in the far right corner immediately felt strange. I paused and studied it for a moment. The bumper sticker she made as a joke was still there. The faded parking pass from her old college hung on the mirror, and the dent she refused to fix sat plainly on the front panel. It was definitely hers. At first, I thought she had stopped here on her way home to pick something up, maybe for the engagement dinner, maybe just snacks, because she loved impulse buys. I walked closer, expecting to see her climbing out of the driver's seat or walking toward the store with a cart. Instead, I saw her in the passenger seat of another car entirely. A black sedan was parked 2 spaces away from her car. Its windows were tinted lightly enough for me to see through from the right angle. Marissa sat inside that sedan, not in her car. She faced a man I had never seen before, sitting close enough that their knees nearly touched. The angle of her shoulders, the way her head tilted toward him, the soft expression across her face, all made it clear this was not a casual conversation. She brushed her hair behind her ear in a way she only did when she was nervous or excited. The man leaned closer, saying something that seemed to amuse her because she burst out laughing, covering her mouth in a way she rarely did with me. My stomach tightened. That instant held something quiet yet heavy, like the first seconds before a storm. I did not move. I did not breathe. I stood there, half shielded between a pickup truck and a cart return bin, watching something unfold that felt both unreal and unmistakable. I moved my hand to my pocket slowly and pulled out my phone. I zoomed in on the license plate of the black sedan. The camera focused, caught the numbers clearly, and I took the picture. I didn't say a word. I didn't walk toward them. I didn't tap on the window. I didn't need to. The truth sat there in front of me, simple and unwrapped.
Drop it in the comments if you would have done what he just did. Would you have been rational enough to not confront them when you already see for yourself what's going on? She's parked a car and a half away from the one she's sitting in, which isn't her own car, with another man. Let's continue.
I turned around and walked back to my car. My head felt strangely clear, like a burst of cold air had swept through it and pushed everything else aside. I got into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove out of the lot. My hands stayed steady on the wheel. My breathing stayed slow. It all felt oddly quiet inside the car, as though I had stepped into a different version of reality. I didn't go to Costco. I didn't finish the errands. I just drove home. The drive took 20 minutes. Every light turned green as if the world wanted to give me nothing to slow down or think too deeply. I kept replaying the posture between them, the easy familiarity, the way her hand rested on the man's arm for a moment, almost as if it was a habit. That was the part that bothered me more than anything. It suggested time. It suggested history. It suggested something fully formed behind my back. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked normal. Nothing seemed disturbed. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The faint scent of her perfume drifted from the hallway, the one she used only on days she wanted to feel confident. I walked toward the kitchen and froze when I saw her. Marissa was already home. She stood by the stove stirring something in a pot, wearing clothes she had not worn earlier. Her hair was tied back differently. Her keys sat on the counter. Her bag rested on the chair near the dining table. Every part of her appearance created a timeline that did not match what I had seen 30 minutes earlier. She turned around, smiled at me, and asked how the errands went. She behaved like someone who had just come home from work. No sign of a Costco parking lot. No sign of a black sedan. No trace of the man in the car. I walked past her to the sink, washed my hands, and took a slow breath. Marissa chatted casually, mentioning something about a client who annoyed her and commented on an email she needed to send later. Her voice carried no hint of guilt or tension. She acted like she had stepped into the house after a predictable, ordinary day. I listened, trying to detect a hesitation or wobble in her tone. There was nothing. She moved comfortably through the kitchen, stirring the food, checking the oven timer, adjusting the seasoning. It felt like watching a performance delivered by someone who believed the audience had no idea the script was a lie. I glanced at the picture on my phone when she turned around to grab something from the pantry.
How do you feel to have a gifted liar share a house with you? For the men and women that's going to watch this video, drop that in the comments. How do you feel sharing a bed with a good deceiver? I look forward to seeing what y'all got to say about that. Let's keep going.
The license plate glowed on the screen, undeniable and clear. She had been in that car with that man during the exact time she claimed she had been drowning in paperwork at her office. The contradiction felt sharp and unmistakable. I put my phone away and helped set the table. I asked how her day had been, listening closely to every detail. She talked about a stressful afternoon and a demanding coworker. Her story flowed smoothly. The more she spoke, the more obvious it became that she had practiced the structure of her lies long before today. As we sat down to eat, I looked at her across the table. Her face held the calm confidence of someone who thought her world was intact. She laughed at something on the television, reached for her drink, and talked about the engagement dinner like nothing stood out of place. But the picture in my pocket stayed cold and heavy, sitting there like a small, loaded truth waiting for its moment. The storm had started. It was only a matter of time before everything ripped open. The next morning arrived with a kind of muted stillness that felt detached from the night before. I got up before Marissa, partly out of habit, and partly because the sight of her sleeping peacefully beside me made the contradictions in my head tighten. I walked into the kitchen, made coffee, and sat at the table while the house kept its calming early morning silence. The image of the license plate stayed clear in my mind. I wanted certainty before anything else. Emotion came second. Confrontation came much later. Information always came first. I had a friend from college named Byron who worked in auto finance and could look up a vehicle's owner if he had the plate number. He didn't ask questions. He rarely cared about the reason. I sent him the photo without context. Marissa eventually entered the kitchen wrapped in her robe, smiling the way she usually did when mornings went smoothly. She kissed my cheek, poured herself a cup of coffee, and started talking about her schedule. She mentioned meetings, deadlines, and her plan to leave early for a workout later in the evening. Not a single detail clashed with what I already knew was a lie. She delivered every sentence cleanly, as though she had lived a full day at the office rather than a different life in the back seat of another man's car. While she talked, my phone buzzed with a message from Byron. I opened it under the table. The car belonged to a man named Colby Mercer, registered 2 towns away, address included, phone number listed, and payment information attached. All of it felt normal, except for the sense of intrusion that crept up my spine. Now the man had a name. Marissa left for work, giving me a kiss before walking out. I watched through the window as she drove away, confident and unbothered. When she disappeared at the end of the street, I grabbed my keys and stepped outside. I needed the rest of the truth. I needed someone else who shared that truth. I dialed the number Byron included. It rang twice before someone answered. A woman with a tired tone spoke. Her name was Sharon. It took a few seconds for me to introduce myself, because the words came slower than my thoughts. When I said the name Colby, she let out a breath that carried weeks of tension. She sounded wary but receptive. After a moment, she asked what this was about. I told her I had a photograph of a black sedan and that I had seen her husband with someone. I asked if she was sitting down, because I didn't want to drop half of the story without giving her room to process it. She said she already suspected something. The hollow tone in her voice told me she had lived in suspicion for days, or maybe longer. I asked if she could meet me in a public place. She agreed. We chose a coffee shop near the center of town, an open space with large windows and plenty of people around. I didn't want anything about this meeting to escalate. I didn't want it to turn into a fight. I wanted clarity. That was all. Before leaving for the meeting, I checked Marissa's location. She had installed an app on both our phones months ago to coordinate schedules. She forgot it existed. Her phone was currently nowhere near her office.
I know about those little apps. Usually they are a good idea. Yeah, let me put it like that. They are usually a good idea. It seems invasive, but I feel like that's only invasive at the boyfriend girlfriend stage. But when you're engaged or otherwise married, it makes sure you can, you know what I'm saying, you know where they are when something seems off for safety reasons. But to think that he's using it so that she could tell on herself is rich. Man, some people, how easily they destroy everything they should be valuing, don't you think? Drop in the comments if you disagree. Let's keep going.
Sat downtown beside a small cafe she used to visit with old coworkers. The detail wasn't enough to accuse her of anything yet, but it planted another crack in the wall she pretended was smooth. I arrived at the coffee shop first. Sharon showed up 10 minutes later, looking exhausted and pulled tight, her hair slightly disheveled and her posture tense. She sat across from me without hesitation. I pulled up the photo and slid the phone toward her. She stared at the screen for several seconds before shifting her gaze to the window. She confirmed that it was her husband. She also confirmed something else. Colby had told her he had been working late for several weeks. She said he had been leaving the house earlier than usual too, sometimes before sunrise. She noticed the change in his voice when she asked direct questions, and she knew something was off, but never had proof. I told her what I saw at Costco. I didn't dramatize it. I didn't soften it. I explained the seating, the body language, the familiarity. She listened quietly, nodding at each detail. When she spoke again, her voice carried a firm steadiness. She said she wanted the truth as much as I did, and she asked if I would share the timeline of everything I remembered. I did. She matched my information with her own. That was when the first twist dropped. She said she had access to a shared family location history through a tablet at home. She hadn't checked it yet because she feared what she might find. She pulled out her phone and logged in. When the screen loaded, she tilted it toward me. There it was. A series of repeated locations marked on the map over the last month. Same place. Same pattern. A short-stay hotel 15 minutes from Costco. The timestamps matched several evenings when Marissa claimed she had been overwhelmed at work. Sharon scrolled down further. The same location popped up again 2 days before the Costco incident. Something cold settled under my ribs. The behavior wasn't a one-time mistake or a sudden lapse. It was a pattern, structured and deliberate. Sharon asked if I planned to tell Marissa immediately. I said no. Confrontation done too early only gives the liar a chance to regroup. I preferred to gather everything and step forward when the ground beneath them was most unstable. While we talked, Marissa texted me. She said lunch was hectic and asked if I could pick up a few things for the engagement dinner. The casual tone gave the message an added sting. She had been in a hotel with another man 2 days earlier and sat in his car the day before, and now she wanted me to buy decorations and snacks. Sharon.
But now you see why I gave it this title, though. Costco was the sneak link spot. Drop, roll credits. But no, like really? Like, for real. Who knows? For all I know, because I'm in Florida, for all I know, Sam's Club is the sneak link spot for people up here. For married people. I mean, I'm playing too much. But no, like for real. You got to be careful about your significant others always having these problems that spring up that's going to take longer. You know what I'm saying? After 3 or 4 times, you got to be like, something's off. I don't know. I'm starting to think this. Costco, BJ Wholesale, Sam's Club, they could be some sneak link spots. If you're married, I'm talking about. Could be.
Asked what I planned next. I said the next step was understanding how far this situation stretched. She nodded and said she wanted to know the same about her husband. Neither of us wanted to cause chaos without direction. We intended to proceed with caution. Later that evening, Marissa returned home with a strangely bright mood. She placed her bag on the table and told me her parents invited us to stay with them over the weekend for some small family gathering. She insisted it would be good for us. She said her mother wanted to talk about seating arrangements for the engagement party. Her father wanted to discuss travel accommodations for relatives. Everything sounded normal and comforting, which made the suggestion unsettling. I agreed to go. As she walked away, I noticed something unusual sticking out of her coat pocket. A plastic card. A hotel key card. It did not belong to any place we had ever stayed together. I reached for the card when she stepped into the bedroom, but she turned around and took her coat before I could touch it. She carried it into the closet, humming softly. The humming made everything somehow worse. Once she was out of sight, I stood there thinking through the timeline. The keycard, the hotel location in Sharon's app, the black sedan, the smile on the passenger seat, the completely reconstructed story at home. Everything lined up in a clean, linear chain. The weekend invitation felt like the next stage, even if she didn't know the ground beneath her feet had already cracked. The storm wasn't coming. It had already started gathering speed. The weekend arrived with a strange weight, like the air held something thick and expectant. Marissa packed earlier than usual, moving around the house with a level of energy that didn't match her work stories. She hummed occasionally, checked her phone repeatedly, and slipped that same coat, the one with the hotel keycard, into her overnight bag. She didn't give me a chance to examine it again, and she didn't notice the tension building behind my quietness. The drive to her parents' place took about an hour. They lived in a comfortable two-story home on a calm street lined with trimmed hedges and identical mailboxes. A classic suburban scene. As soon as we pulled into the driveway, her mother stepped outside, waving enthusiastically, while her father leaned on the porch railing with a forced smile. The welcome carried a hint of rehearsed warmth. It made me suspect Marissa had been telling stories about me long before this weekend. Inside the house, the atmosphere grew stiff quickly. Her mother tried to fill the silence with polite small talk, asking predictable questions about work and the engagement dinner. Her father asked if I had sorted out the catering, speaking in a tone that suggested he doubted I was capable of organizing anything. Their eyes kept flicking toward Marissa as if checking her reactions. During lunch, the strangeness sharpened. Marissa's mother mentioned a conversation Marissa allegedly had with her about my habits, describing me as someone who struggled with trust and overthought small issues. She said it lightly, as though sharing an amusing anecdote. Marissa smiled without looking directly at me. I realized she had built a buffer for herself, preparing her parents to view me as the unreasonable one if things escalated later. That realization remained only a background tension until something else happened, something sharp enough to tilt the entire weekend off balance. The doorbell rang. Marissa's mother opened the door, and the last person I expected stepped inside. The man from the car. Colby walked into the living room holding a bottle of wine, wearing a jacket that looked deliberately chosen. He smiled at everyone except me, offering greetings with a casual familiarity that suggested he had been invited long before today. He introduced himself as a friend from Marissa's old job, saying they had reconnected recently and that he lived in the area.
I'm thinking violent thoughts, but let me try to restabilize. Here's the thing. If you spotted the very dude you investigating against your fiance for infidelity, what would you do if he had the audacity to show up to your face and act like this is just out of nowhere? Put that in the comments. What would you do if you were in this situation? My answer is violence. I'm just putting it right out there. I probably would have messed up my entire situation of trying to get dirt on this dude to tearing the whole house down with everybody in it. Let's resume.
Her father welcomed him in with more enthusiasm than he had shown toward me. Marissa's expression tightened for a split second before she forced it back into composure. She didn't look startled. She looked irritated, as if the timing of his arrival wasn't what she had planned. I stayed silent, watching, cataloging every reaction. Her mother poured him a glass of wine, and the two of them chatted like they had met him before. That detail bothered me. Ooh. If they knew him already, it meant Marissa had been weaving this relationship deeper into her life than I realized. I studied her while she spoke to her parents, noticing how her voice changed when she acknowledged Colby's comments, softer and almost restrained. After lunch, her father suggested we all sit outside in the backyard. The weather was pleasant enough for it. The four of us stepped out onto the patio while her mother prepared dessert inside. Colby followed and stood beside Marissa, a bit too close, in a way that made her stiffen before she stepped aside subtly. I noticed every inch of it. I excused myself after a few minutes, claiming I needed fresh air. Nobody argued. I walked toward the side of the house, slipping away from the patio and around the neighbor's fence line. The hedges created a wall tall enough to hide behind, but thin enough to let me hear everything. That was when I heard them. Marissa and Colby had stepped away from the patio and moved to the far side of the house near the decorative maple tree. Their voices carried clearly in the open space. They weren't whispering. They weren't cautious. They spoke with an ease that only people with long, consistent secrets could manage. I stayed behind the hedge, not moving, letting the moment unfold in front of me. Marissa told him their timeline needed to stay tight. She said she would handle everything after the engagement dinner because ending things earlier might create questions among family and friends. She explained that people had already bought gifts and booked hotel rooms for the event, and she didn't want to deal with the embarrassment of canceling too soon. She insisted she needed more time to separate cleanly without losing everything that made the engagement socially useful. Colby pushed back, asking when she intended to tell her parents. She said she needed to figure out how much support she could secure before shifting her life entirely. She didn't want to jump without knowing where she would land financially. The frankness in her tone struck me harder than the betrayal itself. The relationship wasn't built on affection. It was built on convenience, image, and positioning.
Can somebody say scam artist? Or what's the term that they use for people you meet online? Romance scam? Only in person. Whew. I feel bad for this homeboy.
Another car pulled into the driveway. Sharon stepped out. She slammed the door behind her and walked with the determined pace of someone who had already decided what she was willing to burn. I didn't move from behind the hedge. I didn't need to. The moment belonged entirely to her. She marched across the yard and stopped a few feet from them. Marissa froze. Colby tried to step forward, but she raised a hand and shut him down. She didn't shout. She didn't resort to theatrics. She simply told him she had tracked his location again and that she wanted both of them to understand exactly how deep their decisions had cut into her life. Her calmness broke the atmosphere in a way shouting never could have. Marissa looked at the ground. Colby looked at the fence. Neither of them had anything to say. Her parents noticed the commotion and stepped outside. The scene quickly expanded. Voices layered over each other. Accusations formed. Defenses crumbled. Lines were drawn so quickly that everyone ended up on opposite sides without realizing when the shifting began. Marissa accused Sharon of dramatizing everything. Sharon laid out the timeline with cold precision. Her father turned to Marissa, demanding explanations. Her mother tried to smooth everything over, insisting misunderstandings were possible. Someone tried to blame me. Marissa's father shot me a look that carried suspicion. Her mother suggested quietly that I might have influenced Sharon's sudden arrival. The implication hung in the air long enough for Marissa to latch onto it, claiming I had been acting strangely, implying I was obsessed with her whereabouts, and saying I overreacted to small concerns. All of it came out smoothly, like she had rehearsed it. I let them talk. I didn't defend myself. I didn't interrupt. I didn't need to. I had more information than any of them knew. When the shouting grew too loud, I stepped back toward the house, walked inside, grabbed my bag, and left through the front door. Marissa called after me, but I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that needed to happen in front of them. The weekend wasn't supposed to end like this, but it revealed exactly what needed to be exposed. Something new had started forming in me as I walked to the car. Sharp, organized, patient. The final stage would not be loud. It would be deliberate. I drove away from Marissa's parents' house without turning back. The neighborhood slipped behind me, quiet and tidy, as though it had nothing to do with the implosion happening inside one of its spotless homes. The steering wheel felt steady beneath my hands. My thoughts finally aligned in a straight row, no longer tangled in questions. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. Now I only needed to finish what the weekend had already begun. I reached home, dropped my bag near the door, and sat down at the dining table. The silence inside the house felt different this time. Not empty, not sad, just truthful. Every lie she had fed into this space now echoed back with its own clarity. I opened my phone and began organizing everything I had gathered. The Costco photo, the plate number, Byron's vehicle lookup, Sharon's shared location logs, the hotel pattern, the overheard conversation by the maple tree, Marissa's timeline inconsistencies, the keycard. The evidence formed a clean path from beginning to end. No missing links, no loose ends, no room for her to twist the story or redirect blame. I compiled everything into a single folder on my laptop and wrote a straightforward summary with dates, locations, and context. The next step required care. I didn't want a chaotic explosion. I wanted structure. I wanted an outcome that left no cracks for her to crawl back through. Before sending anything, I reached out to Sharon one last time. I told her what I had overheard at the house. I told her about the weekend's argument and how Marissa's parents had tried to shift blame onto me. Sharon sighed, exhausted but composed. She said she would file for legal separation in the morning. She had already prepared the documents. She only needed confirmation before signing them. Then she asked a question I knew was coming. She asked if I planned to confront Marissa face to face. I said no. Confrontations only satisfy emotion. Evidence delivers consequences. She understood immediately. While we talked, I heard footsteps outside. 2 minutes later, Marissa opened the door and stepped inside. She looked irritated and breathless, carrying the same coat she had guarded all weekend. She demanded to know why I left the gathering so abruptly. She paced the room as she spoke, her voice rising and falling in practiced waves. She threw out explanations, shifting blame quickly, trying to fill the air before I had the chance to speak. She said Sharon had overreacted. She claimed the conversation near the maple tree had been twisted. She insisted her father was stressed and that everything simply escalated. I waited until she finished. Then I asked where she had been earlier that afternoon between lunch and Colby's arrival. She stumbled over her answer, changing the time twice, then mentioning a store she never visited. I asked about the keycard. Her reaction answered the question before her mouth did. She reached for her bag, clutching it protectively, trying to hide the pause between her breaths. I didn't argue with her. I didn't press. I let the silence settle long enough for her to feel its shape. Then I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and came back with a small box. Inside it were documents related to the engagement party, receipts, venue confirmations, vendor details. I placed the box on the table and told her she could keep every item inside because none of it concerned me anymore. She asked what that meant. I said I would send her an explanation shortly. Then I left the house. I drove to a quiet parking lot near the river. The water moved slowly in the dimming light. It felt like the right place to end the emotional phase and begin the practical one. I opened my laptop and prepared the email. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It was organized, time-stamped, and complete. One attachment held the evidence collection. The body explained the relevance of each piece and how everything connected. There were no threats, no insults, no attempts to provoke, just clarity. I sent it to Marissa, her parents, the engagement venue, the caterer, her employer, Sharon, Colby's employer. Her employer mattered most. She worked for a medical nonprofit that held strict ethical policies regarding client boundaries and workplace conduct. Section 6 of their policy outlined disciplinary action for undisclosed relationships that created conflicts of interest. One line in the policy specifically addressed inappropriate personal entanglements that compromised professional integrity. The hotel logs, the weekday rendezvous, the timeline, all fit that category neatly. Once the email was sent, I turned the car off and stared out across the water. It didn't feel like triumph. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like the moment after a long-held breath finally exhaled. The responses arrived quickly. Her mother sent a long paragraph filled with shock, disbelief, and attempts to repair the image she and her husband had projected. Her father wrote a shorter message asking for privacy. Both tried to distance themselves from Marissa's decisions, though neither apologized for blaming me earlier. The venue manager responded 30 minutes later, confirming that since the contract listed me as the primary signatory, my portion of the deposit would be refunded within 5 business days. Marissa's portion, however, was non-refundable due to a liability clause she had signed separately when she insisted on upgrading the decor package.
Ooh.
A small ripple of irony ran through me when I read that line. Sharon wrote last. She thanked me for being straightforward and said she had already forwarded the documents to her attorney. The next morning delivered the final shift. Marissa's employer called. They requested a statement. I told them I had already provided everything relevant and had nothing more to add. By afternoon, Marissa was suspended pending review. By evening, she had been dismissed for violating her conduct agreement. The official reason involved dishonesty and misuse of workplace time. Her parents called me again that night. Their tone had changed sharply. Fear replaced judgment. They asked if I knew where she was, because she had shown up at their house demanding support and refusing to leave when they told her she needed to take responsibility for what had happened. They asked if I could help calm her down. I said I would not involve myself further. The boundaries were final. 3 days later, the engagement venue sent the refund. The vendors removed my name from their lists. The catering invoice updated. My schedule cleared one item at a time, leaving no reminders of a life that no longer existed. A week passed. I visited a small coffee shop on the other side of town, a place far from any old routines. While waiting in line, I noticed someone clearing tables near the window. She moved slowly, tired and unfocused. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. Her hair was tied back without care. She wiped the tables mechanically, barely noticing anyone around her. It was Marissa. She didn't look up. She didn't see me. The moment didn't require an interaction. It didn't ask for closure through words. The consequences had already run their course. She had lost the job she valued. She had lost the stability she depended on. She had lost the safety net she expected to fall into. Her decisions had cut through her life with a precision she had never anticipated. I left the coffee shop quietly and walked back to my car. The air felt lighter than it had in weeks. The truth had settled. The storm had passed, and the last piece of my old life stood behind me, fading into the distance as calmly as the river had moved that night.
Even though that was beautiful, how both of them got their comeuppance. The dude in the car got, you know what I'm saying, is getting his legal separation for his infidelity. And he's getting, all he had to do was just step back and let her fall flat on her face. But I still feel like I would have took a sledgehammer to that windshield back in Costco. I don't know, I'm just saying. I wouldn't wait. I mean, the long game sounds great. As much as I love it, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have waited that long. Most of us, let's not pretend like we would have. We wouldn't have plotted this long way around. But I'm glad he did. And he got his refund for the whole wedding venue. That was nice too. I like that. But see, how do we always say, and everybody's saying it nowadays, play dumb games, win dumb prizes? Fits. Thank you all for watching. Please be sure to like, share, and follow for more. And I'll see you on the next one. We out.